Now, yesterday's official IOC ban of the Russian Olympic Committee, the Russian flag, their national anthem, all of that from the upcoming Winter Olympic Games, and presented as a bold statement against widespread state-sponsored doping and seen in Russia as a Western slap at Russia's national prestige and pride. American gold medal skier Julia Mancuso was among those U.S. athletes applauding the strong stand taken by the IOC as she on Instagram said, state-sponsored doping? For those who cheat, imagine the emotional exhaustion you have caused others. And even worse are those who encourage athletes to dope. As the IOC announced the ban, Russian Olympic athletes watched glumly, knowing the path for them to compete as independent athletes is now going to require them to prove their innocence and adherence to valid testing. Two separate independent investigations and documented whistleblowing by former Russian scientist Gregory Rodchenkov produced an astounding story in scope and depth, doping and cheating that dwarfs the former East Germany. 11 Russian medalists at the 2014 Sochi Winter Games were later found to have been doping. In all, 25 Russian athletes from Sochi were retroactively disqualified. Through recent years, over 1,000 Russian athletes were involved in doping and state-sponsored testing cover-up. And going all the way back to Beijing, those Olympics 9 years ago, 38 Russian Olympic medals have been stripped. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin had already blamed the doping investigation on the United States, saying it was retaliation for the ongoing U.S. probe into alleged Russian meddling in last year's presidential election. In fact, even before the ban, Putin said IOC action was designed to muddy his re-election bid early next year. Russian sentiment on the street is clear. The United States is seen as whining over superior Russian Olympic performances. Yesterday's ban produced anger.
Я считаю, конечно, спортсменов жалко, сильно люди готовятся, но надо уважать себя, и без флага, без гимна это не команда.
So Russia is officially banned in Pyeongchang, South Korea next year, and we say hello to journalist Philip Hersh, who has covered 18 Olympic Games, and at his blog, Globetrotting by PhilipHersh.com, he has called this ban on Russia, quote, symbolic. Philip, why do you say it's symbolism?
Well, they're banning some symbols of Russia, the flag, the anthem, but they're not banning Russian athletes. And I think you're going to see a lot of Russian athletes cleared to compete in the Pyeongchang Olympic Games. And I just learned today that the uniforms are going to say that full acronym, Olympic athlete from Russia, so there won't be any question whom they are representing.
What's the process and how rigorous will it be if I'm a Russian athlete and I feel that I have been clean or I haven't been caught to make application to compete?
Well, the whole process hasn't been completely delineated. The big difference between this and Rio is that the IOC, rather than individual sports federations, is going to have the final say. We've already got today the Court of Arbitration for Sport announced that it had received appeals from 22 of the athletes who've been disqualified from the Sochi Games as a result of these doping allegations. So those athletes are among those. Anybody who has a prior doping allegation is going to be out. But these athletes are now all appealing, so who knows what's going to happen.
Did the IOC dodge this effectively? I mean, did they try and cut the baby in half? Did they succeed?
This was definitely a realpolitik kind of solution. I mean, they couldn't do nothing. I mean, Thomas Bach called it an attack on the integrity of the Olympic Games and of sport, and an unprecedented attack. And when you say that, you have to do something. But they also didn't want to irritate the big Russian bear because they are a major player in Olympic sports, clearly. So, I mean, they tried to do a very delicate balancing act, and I think they wound up with a symbolic rather than a real solution.
And within the last 2 hours, we learned that President Putin in Moscow has said he will not prevent, as he said, athletes from competing there. So effectively, they have everything except their flag and their anthem, they believe.
Well, one of the things that as they go through this process of clearing athletes, Russians won medals in 10 sports at the Sochi Winter Games. Athletes in all 10 of those sports have been disqualified. Athletes in 5 of them have already lost medals. So I think that if, in fact, those athletes are all barred from participating in Pyeongchang, there will be a lower Russian medal count, but I think there will still be a lot of Russian athletes. They'll just send their younger athletes and let them get experience.
Got about 30 seconds. How credible, and put the Russians to the side if you can, because they're the outlier. They did it better and longer than anybody. The East Germans maybe longer. How credible is anti-doping efforts around the world?
Not as credible as we all would like. I mean, clearly, the clean athletes cannot prove they're clean all the time, and most of the dirty athletes aren't caught. So a lot of money is being spent on this system, and how effective it is has always been in question. I would say that it's really not that effective.
Yeah, the reporting, Bonnie Ford, online at ESPN.com, the New York Times, Rebecca Ruiz, some great stuff. And Philip Hersh, you can read him at Globetrotting by philiphersh.com on this. Philip, good to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.